Blocker, Mr. Beck with having the final Wednesday of the month. My apologies for not having these coordinated. I do want to give kudos to Mr. Blocker, Mr. Mari Bali, for making sure that the financial reports monthly have always been made available on our website, so that even in absent having a meeting, that's been available to the residents as well as to the board members, so that we have access to reports that we'll know where we're at on a monthly basis. So thank you for that work. And having said that, we'll go straight into our monthly financials, the numbers that we generally cover. I'll start with our general fund, which is page 15 of the page 15 if you printed out the deck, and it's page 18 if you're looking at it on a digital device, which shows that we had a monthly deficit for these are covering the month of August. So for the month of August, we had a monthly deficit $454,309 with a fiscal year to date. And when we say fiscal year, that means May 1st through the end of August, 4 months of the fiscal year to date surplus in the general fund, $110,643.23. So I want to pause there to see if there are any questions from the board or any comments that Chris has. I know on this, we're going to go into a few different comments. I think he gave some wonderful notes for conversation pieces, but pause to see if any board members have questions or if there's anything that Chris wants to add before I guess I ask my questions.
Question I got is explain the $454,000 deficit.
Chris, you're on mute.
Thank you. So that means that that you had more expenses for the month of August compared to actual collections in the general fund. So you had 1.8 million in expenses just for August compared to 1.4 million in revenue for just August.
But actual year to date, we're still $110,000 in the positive.
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Brown, any questions? And the last point that I had on here showed the Melanie Fitness Center operating expenses increased due to utilities and professional services. Has there been any, I guess, what's happening with the Melanie that's got that increasing? And then I guess that's probably a point that we have to discuss at the board in terms of what direction we're going with that, because that's just a money drain.
Yes, it is.
But when you say other professional services,
what does that include?
Can you kind of elaborate what services those will be?
What page is that on?
That's we're on the notes to the financials, the second page.
Let me see what I can see.
But it says its operating expense have increased by $11,000. That's a lot for a place that's not actually being operated.
I can look into the increase for other professional services and look at what's the difference for that line item as to what's additional expenses, if there's anything largely that was charged this year compared to last year, and get back to you guys.
Okay.
Define restricted cash.
So that would be like your TIF money, your MFT money, any ARPA monies, because those are all segregated cash that is only allowed for specific purposes.
There's like asset forfeiture as well?
Yeah.
But what about the stuff that you say would be type, but what about the stuff we already budgeted for? That's fine to be spent, that just nothing over what's budgeted for.
So there's two concepts here. There's budget and then there's cash. From a budget standpoint, you guys are, from an expense standpoint, right at where you're supposed to be. You're under the 33%, which is 4 months of spending. So from a budget standpoint for expenditures, you are in range as to where you're supposed to be. Now we have to look at it from a cash standpoint. Cash is different. You don't have equal 12 months of cash coming in. So your revenues from a cash standpoint for the general fund are not going to be received equally over 12 months. There are certain high periods of cash coming in from a revenue standpoint, and then there's the low months. Normally, July and August would be high cash real estate taxes months, because that's usually when you would get a large portion of your real estate tax distribution. But because the real estate taxes went out late by the county, your cash and revenue from that standpoint is lower than what normally would be at this time because of that fact. So from a budgetary standpoint for expenses, you guys are right on track as to where you should be for 4 months of spending.
So further questions in there. There was one point in there, Chris, well, two items I had questions on. On the second page of the notes, I had the village only received 3 months of the Homewood disposal services compared to 4 years in the prior months. Can you expand on that, or I wasn't quite receiving that?
So Homewood disposal, since right now we have not issued a bond for Homewood disposal, they are being paid based upon the invoice they receive and then the cash that goes out. So normally when we had the bond proceeds, every month it would just be May, June, July, we would record revenue expense equal for the month of services. But since we are now 1 month behind due to the fact that the invoice comes in and then we pay the invoice. So we have, for these financials, we would have July services that would be paid in August. So we're only reflecting right now, May, June, and July on these financials from an expense standpoint,
So
because we would not have received the August invoice until September 1st. So it wouldn't have been included on the warrant list for you guys' approval because by the September 1st, the warrant list would have already been sent to you, so we wouldn't have it to input. So you'll see it on the October warrant list, you'll see those services. So last year we would have 4 months because it's an automatic standard as to what the bond proceeds are versus the invoice.
Okay.
Compared to now where we're waiting on the invoice to recognize the expense.
So right now we're paying for Homewood disposal out the general fund,
Yes.
and we haven't. Is this no? Maybe I heard it wrong. Is this normal practice, or in previous years we've been taking the bond out by now, and the bond will be paid for?
In the previous years, you would normally have issued a bond to cover Homewood disposal.
Well,
And
that's-
what would happen is because the normal practice in the prior years is we would go into debt with Homewood disposal until the village issued a bond. But so to avoid that process, because I do know one of the intentions of the board was to decrease the amount that we would owe Homewood disposal. And I know we in the budget decreased how much we would eventually bond with Homewood, but I don't know what the ultimate decision as to what's going to be the bond with Homewood from a village standpoint as to how they want to address that versus what option do they want to go for decreasing the bond. So that we don't go into debt beyond whatever the intention of the board is from a standpoint of issuing the bond. I've been continually including Homewood disposal on the warrant list, so that way we don't go beyond what the ultimate decision of the board is as to how much they're going to bond for Homewood. Does that make sense to everyone?
Stephen, I have one question with the intention, because we budgeted for 1.25 million. So I mean, I would say that would be the intention. Did something happen that adjusted that or gave a different impression?
One of the things I sent to the board is a proposal as to the various options the board could have to eliminate the bonding process. So I never received any direction as to, is it just the 1.2 or do we want to go one of those 3 options, or what those intentions are, really from my end as to next steps, how to move forward with that.
Okay, I'll receive that. I'll speak with the other committee members and other board members, and I'll get you a firm response this week. Yeah, my impression was that we were moving forward to 1.25 until we had a different until there was an approved different way to move forward. But I'll follow up with you this week on that.
Okay, perfect. And I'll add a note as them to reach out to the attorney for negotiation that.
Okay, thank you.
You guys are right on track as to where you should be for 4 months of spending.
So for 4 months of spending, they're right on track. But I thought Tiffany spent all the money in the first 3 months. You see, this is why history is important.